There we go. Well, we're continuing to study in the book of Mark. We have, counting this week, 4 weeks. So once we're done with this week, we've got 3 weeks left in the book of Mark. Then we're going to do a 4-week series that I've entitled Friends. And then at the request of the elders, we're going to have a 10-week series. Now get this. Hold on to your bootstraps on the book of Revelation. That is coming in the near future. So that's kind of to whet your appetite of what's out in front of us. But for today, we're going to be focusing on Mark chapter 15, verses 1 to 20. And before we get into the text itself, I thought what we ought to do is do a bit of review. I've titled this morning's message, God Can Do All That He's Promised. God can do all that He's promised. If you remember over the last few weeks, we've noted that Jesus was there in the garden on the Mount of Olives, if you will. And then on that mountain, he was arrested. He was hauled in before the Jewish council under the cover of night. The chief priest asked him, "Are you the Christ, the Son of the Blessed?" In essence, are you the Christ, the Son of God? Jesus answered, "I am. You'll see the Son of Man sitting at the right hand of power and coming with the clouds of the sky." Jesus' answer to him. The chief priest tore his clothes and he asked the council for a conviction, a sentence of death, if you will. And they willingly gave it to that council. It's here that we pick up Mark's account of Jesus' life today. We're going to be transitioning from the religious part of the trial over to the civil portion of Jesus' trial. Or maybe, to put it better, we're going to begin focusing on the civil portion of Jesus being railroaded to the cross. Let's begin here at Mark chapter 15, verses 1 to 5. It says there, "Very early in the morning, the chief priests with the elders, the teachers of the law, and the whole Sanhedrin reached a decision. They bound Jesus, led him away, and handed him over to Pilate. "Are you the king of the Jews?" asked Pilate. "Yes, it's as you say," Jesus replied. The chief priests accused him of many things. So again, Pilate asked him, "Aren't you going to answer? See how many things they're accusing you of?" But Jesus still made no reply, and Pilate was amazed. You know, during the dark of night, hiding in the shadows, if you will, the council did its dirty work. When daylight came, the religious elite took their dog and pony show to the public venue. It had to come out into the open. They were well aware that Jesus had gained a large following. And they were kind of scared of the folks that were following Jesus. They needed their ducks in a row before the Roman courts opened. You see, the Roman courts were only open for a few hours in the morning. You had to get stuff done in their time frame because that was the time frame they were open. And if you weren't there before they closed, you weren't getting in for that day. They knew that they needed to put an end to Jesus and all of his meddling before he ruined their cushy positions there in the temple. I mean, they were raking in the big bucks from all the things that they were doing there. It was underhanded, it was wrong, it was wicked, and Jesus was calling them on it, turning over things, running people out. Their illegal actions from the night before, hiding in the darkness, hiding in the shadows, convicting Jesus religiously for committing blasphemy, if you will. It wasn't blasphemy, we know, because he was the Son of God. But in their eyes, it was. Their illegal gathering in which they convicted Jesus needed to get the stamp of approval of Rome, or they couldn't do anything. Without the court's ratification of their decision, they couldn't do anything. By bringing their forced judgment, if you will, out into the daylight, they hoped to skirt the law right around the edges and proceed to have Jesus crucified. if there was any hope of getting rid of this thorn in the flesh, this thorn in their side, if there was any hope of getting rid of Jesus, they needed to get things moving, and they needed to get them moving quickly. They needed to get Pilate's approval before the Sabbath. Then they needed to make sure Jesus was dead and buried before the Sabbath got there. Their time, because of all these constraints, their time, their evil desire, and the timing of it had to be unfolded just right. And they were masters of getting that done. They bound Jesus and they took him before Pilate. Pilate wasted no time getting to the point. He could have cared less about the Jewish laws. He could have cared less about blasphemy. That was not Pilate's concern at all, because this was a civil court, not a religious court. He could have cared less about the Jewish laws. What he wanted to know was straightforward. Pilate asked him, "Are you the king of the Jews?" Did you notice that? Are you the king of the Jews? Pilate's question makes it clear that the council has accused Jesus of seeking to establish himself as a king. Now, this would have been considered by Rome itself, by Rome proper, it would have been considered to be treason if somebody was actually setting themselves up as a king. And it would have required Pilate to act immediately to get things under control. Since the death of Herod, the Jews really haven't had a king. Herod's son tried to step in, but they would not give him the title. Rome declined the request for Herod's son to be named in his place. As things begin to unfold, it's going to be really, really interesting. The charge against Jesus, you see, it's not without some substance. When you know the history, the background of the Jewish people, and it's not without some substance. Now, don't get me wrong, it was still a mock trial. He still got railroaded. But Jesus has admitted to being the Messiah. And the Jewish people expected the Messiah to be a king like David. Remember that? Ruling with an iron scepter. The Jews fully expected the Messiah to reestablish the greatness of Israel by driving out the Romans and leading them back to a place of authority and power. Now, here's the thing. The Jewish council didn't really believe Jesus was the Messiah. They didn't believe that. Had they believed he was the Messiah, they would have been encouraging him instead of trying to get the guy killed. You see the picture here? Here's Jesus, the Son of God, the Messiah, come to earth, and they just don't believe it. It's like they're snubbing their nose. They're saying, there's no way you're the Messiah. You're not what we expected. It's not unfolding like we thought it would. But they knew how seriously Rome would take the threat to their power if they could get them to believe Jesus was trying to usurp the kingship, to take the power from Rome. And they saw this as the most likely way, the Jewish elite saw this as the most likely way to get Pilate to issue a death sentence for Jesus. You see how it's beginning to unfold? They couldn't kill Jesus without the support of Rome. They could declare him guilty, but they had no right to crucify him, no right to kill him without Rome saying it's okay to proceed. Pilate didn't care about their charges of blasphemy, but the new king in Jerusalem, if Jesus indeed was this, a new king, it would have been a huge issue. Usurping the authority of Rome simply would not have been tolerated. The fact is, in spite of them not recognizing it, Jesus was the Messiah and the eternal King of the Jews. I've been spending several weeks now studying the book of Revelation. And the comparison here, I can't help but stick it in right here. Throughout the Old Testament, they kept saying, someone's coming. Someone's coming. The Messiah is on his way. The Messiah is going to get here. And they come up with an elaborate understanding of what that was going to look like. He was going to come in on a white horse, riding in great power, conquer the nations, set Israel up, back on the throne, rule there forever and ever. They were going to be the ones in control. And whenever Jesus came, he was none of that. He was a little baby born in a manger, setting up not a physical kingdom, but a spiritual one. I have to wonder, after having spent this many weeks studying Revelation in preparation for the upcoming sermon series, I have to wonder if we won't be a lot like them in our understanding of Revelation. We might do our best to unfold it, but until it happens, we're just giving it what we call an educated guess as we look toward the end of times. They had given it an educated guess, and what they decided is what they thought was going to happen was not what Jesus was. He did not fit into their mold. But in spite of the fact of not recognizing it, Jesus was the Messiah, the eternal King of the Jews. And while we may not recognize everything right as it unfolds nearing the end of time, when it finally comes to light, we're going to gradually get it. Man, I tell you, we are in for some overwhelming things. We'll talk about that in 4 or 5 weeks out here in the future, a few weeks out here in the future. Right now, we need to stick with Mark. If you'll remember, when Jesus was coming through Jericho, heading down by the Mount of Olives, down through the Kidron Valley and into the city of Jerusalem, the people began to lay down palm branches. And they began to declare that he was the Messiah, the Son of David. In essence, they gave him a kingly welcome as he made his way to Jerusalem. He had been anointed. Soon Pilate himself would call Jesus, now get this, Pilate himself would call Jesus the King of the Jews. The soldiers would mock him, calling him, guess what? The King of the Jews. The inscription above his head on the cross read, the King of the Jews. Are you getting the point? Are you getting where we're going with this? But for now, Pilate wanted to get the truth straight from the horse's mouth, so to speak. Are you, looking Jesus in the eye, are you the King of the Jews? Now, Jesus' initial response was just a bit uncommittal. He said, well, so you say. So you say. You said it. So you say. To claim kingship would have given the false impression that Jesus wants to establish himself as a rival to Rome. But that's simply not the case. On the other hand, Jesus wasn't about to deny the fact that he was indeed a king. Because if he had denied that fact, he would have been telling a lie. Because he was indeed the King of Kings and Lord of Lords. He's the King of the Jews, but his kingdom is not of this earth. This earth is going to melt with fervent heat. The heavens are going to be rolled up like a scroll, and a new heaven and a new earth are going to be created. And the new Jerusalem will come down, and we will enjoy it for all eternity as believers in Jesus Christ. He's the king, but his kingdom is not of this earth. His kingdom is eternal. Jesus simply hadn't come to overthrow Rome. That wasn't his purpose. We're told that the chief priests accused him of many things. That's one of them, I think. But it says they accused him of many things. But it doesn't tell us what all those accusations were. Here's what I think was going on. I think the Jewish elite were throwing accusations up against the proverbial wall to see if they could get any of them to stick. Well, Jesus said, well, Jesus did, well, Jesus is, well, Jesus. They were trying to get something to stick so that they could get Pilate's approval to kill Jesus. Now, Pilate seemed to be a bit taken back by Jesus' lack of concern about all these accusations that they're throwing at him, one right after the other. And he asked him, Snowden paraphrase, Jesus, has the cat got your tongue? Why aren't you defending yourself? Jesus, is your hearing okay? Jesus, don't you understand just how bad these accusations are? But Jesus remained silent. Jesus' lack of resolve to defend himself, it perplexed Pilate to no end. How could anybody refuse to defend themselves against charges that could lead to their own death? It just made no sense to Pilate. Down deep inside, I think Pilate is starting to understand that this isn't about treason at all. This is about envy, and this is about hate. The council's trying to use Pilate to get their dirty work done, and he doesn't like it one bit. And that brings us down to Mark chapter 15, verses 6 to 15. It says there, "Now it was the custom at the feast to release a prisoner whom the people requested. A man named Barabbas," if you look over at Matthew, you'll find it's Jesus Barabbas. "A man called Barabbas was in prison with the insurrectionists who committed murder in the uprising. The crowd came up and asked Pilate to do for them what he usually did. 'Do you want me to release to you the king of the Jews?' asked Pilate, knowing it was out of envy that the chief priests had handed him over to him. But the chief priests stirred up the crowd to have Pilate release Barabbas instead. 'What shall I do then with the one that you call king of the Jews?' Pilate asked them. 'Crucify him,' they shouted. 'Why? What crime has he committed?' asked Pilate. But they shouted all the louder, 'Crucify him.' Wanting to satisfy the crowd, Pilate released Barabbas to them, and he had Jesus flogged and handed over to be crucified. Pilate tries to reason with the religious elite. He wants to extend an acquittal to Jesus because he understands it's envy and hatred on the part of the religious elite that's brought Jesus in front of him. He even devised what he believed to be an amicable solution, but he couldn't get it to fly with these hate mongers that placed themselves in front of God. He said it was customary. It's normal. It's what we usually do to release someone at the feast. Pilate thought that he'd use this loophole, if you will, to get them to let Jesus go. I mean, it would make sense, wouldn't it? You'd let Jesus go. He's a healer. He's somebody who does good things. Instead of this murderer named Barabbas, he extended them what he thought was a no-brainer. Who would you rather release? Jesus the Messiah or Jesus Barabbas? You know, that murdering insurrectionist. Which one do you want me to put on the street? The murderer or this guy? I can just imagine the look on Pilate's face, the perplexed look on his face when he heard their response. "Release Barabbas!" The chief priests cried out. These guys would rather let a known murderer out of prison than to let Jesus go free. You talk about hate. You talk about envy. You talk about a group of messed up men. Something wasn't right, and Pilate knew it. He tried to pry out their intent. So if I release this murdering insurrectionist, what do you want me to do with Jesus? He's trying to figure out where they are, what it is they're looking for. Their response revealed their hearts. There was no doubt left. He knew exactly what they wanted. They began to cry, "Crucify him! Crucify him!" They even went around stirring up the crowd and got them to begin chanting, "Crucify him! Crucify him! Crucify him!" over and over again. Pilate couldn't wrap his mind around the request. What on earth has this guy done? What has made them have such a visceral response to this poor man? What's wrong with these religious elite folks? By now it's clear. Jesus was being railroaded by the religious elite. He was being railroaded directly to the cross. The last thing Pilate wanted was an uprising on his hands. He was afraid if he didn't do what they asked, they would stir things up so much that Rome would come after him for not keeping the peace. So he let Barabbas go. I'm pretty sure that Pilate knew the chief priests were acting out of jealousy and hate. He might be sympathetic to Jesus, But business is business. Pilate offered to release Jesus, suggesting that Pilate really didn't think Jesus posed any threat to Rome. He wasn't concerned about him raising himself up as a king and taking on Rome. But here's the thing, Pilate is between a rock and a hard place. You ever heard that saying before? He's between a rock and a hard place. If he refused their request, they're going to stir things up and get him in trouble with Rome. That's the last thing Pilate wants. He's got a cushy position, and he isn't about to jeopardize it. But the pressure isn't over yet. You think this guy is under pressure now? You ain't seen nothing yet. According to Matthew, Pilate's wife is upset by a dream, and she sends him a message. She says, hubby, don't have anything to do with this. Don't have anything to do with sentencing this innocent man. In essence, she says, he's innocent. Don't let them get to you. Don't do this. But Pilate's in a no-win situation. If he gives in to their demands and has Jesus crucified, he's going to have his wife mad at him, and that's really bad. I think it is. But if he doesn't, he risks having Rome mad at him. And they'd kill him much faster than his wife would, unless she'd be slow about it. In the end, Matthew tells us Pilate simply washes his hands of the whole mess. It symbolized his attempt to declare himself innocent of the death that he's about to allow. He has Jesus flogged. And a Roman flogging was a horrible punishment. A heavy whip was brought down again and again across the victim's shoulders, back, and legs. At first, it would have just cut through the skin, but as the blows continue, it would cut deeper and deeper, all the way into the muscles. As the beating continued, there would be blood squirting from the victim and his torn flesh. The lead, the bone, the metal, the glass attached to the whip would have been causing deep bruises and deep gashes. The beating continued, and as it did, there would be bruises that happened which would be opened up, and there would be blood absolutely everywhere. Finally, the skin on the victim's back would be shredded, barely hanging onto the bones. The entire area would have been nothing but a torn mass of bleeding tissue. And when the centurion in charge determined that the prisoner is near death, the beating finally ended. That's what you're remembering when you meet around this table. They untie the victim and they allow him to slump down to the pavement, wet with his own blood. This is what Pilate agreed to when he handed Jesus over to be crucified. And that takes us down to Mark chapter 15, verses 16 to 20. The soldiers led Jesus away into the palace, that is the praetorium, and called together the whole company of soldiers. They began to call out to him, "Hail, King of the Jews!" Again and again they struck him on the head with a staff. They spit on him. Falling on their knees, they paid homage to him. And when they mocked him, they took off the purple and put his own clothes on him. And then they led him out to crucify him. Once handed over to the soldiers, Jesus is led away. Now here's the thing, a condemned prisoner no longer had any rights. He had been declared guilty. He had been sentenced to death. He had no rights. The soldiers could treat him any way they pleased. And these guys are strong, rough men, accustomed to physical force. Their mockery of Jesus was their entertainment for the day. The soldiers clothed him with purple. A woven crown of thorns was thrust upon his head. They began to yell, "Hail, King of the Jews!" Struck his head with a reed, just like a stake. Bang! "Prophesy, who hit you?" They spit on him. Man, I hate that. Spit on him. They even bowed down before him, making fun of him and his situation over and over again. But all of this was horseplay compared to the flogging he's just endured. and is horseplay in comparison to what he will endure on the cross of Calvary. The irony, of course, is that Jesus really is a king worthy of honor. When they get tired of their little games, they took the purple robe off of Jesus, which was a symbol of kingship, and they put his own garments on him, and they led him away to be crucified. He walked through the streets carrying his cross on his shoulders as far as he could carry it till it fell beneath the weight of the load, and then had Simon to come and help carry it the rest of the way. Historically, he would also have carried a sign that would have let everyone see the offense that had resulted in his sentence of death, and Herod was brave enough to put down the truth. It read, "The King of the Jews." Jesus' death purchased grace once for all. God promises us that this grace is able to take away even the blackest of sins. Friends, the cross of Christ wields amazing power. Do you have the faith to claim it? Do you have the faith of Abraham, a faith that prompted him to do all that God asked him to do? Do you believe that God is able to do all that he's promised? That's the kind of faith Abraham had. If so, now's the time to come and make that faith known as we sing, "Lord, I'm coming home."